Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Police Accountability Show. And remember, when you watch the Police Accountability Show, you agree to being offended, as well as nothing that you see on the Police Accountability Show constitutes as legal advice. Please contact your local lawyer. And hi everyone, welcome to the Police Accountability Show. I'm your host, Chad Christophers, and we're here today to talk to you about, should you be allowed to fight the police? Now, if the police are arresting you, maybe improperly, incorrectly, when they're not supposed to, should you have the legal right to fight them back? And my personal belief is no. Why? The police have the right to detain you and arrest and detain you up to 72 hours as part of their criminal investigation or any investigation. And you fighting back to the police while they're trying to do their jobs, whether they're making a mistake or not, does not forgive you fighting back against the police. A. B. They have to do that anyways. They need to do their jobs, right? And if they take you in and you don't fight and they're in the wrong, then you win. So why would you give up the winning position to be in the losing one, right? This is a picture here of a professional wrestler that apparently tried to fight off several cops trying to arrest him, which, probably didn't work out the best for him in the long run. But that's the point. There's no reason for you to punch, hit the police, or do anything else. They have the legal right to detain you. There's nothing you can do about it. The only thing that's going to happen when you do not go at them when they're trying to arrest you is more cops are going to come and they're going to escalate the arrest. Doesn't matter what you did, doesn't matter why, doesn't matter how. If they're going to arrest you, they're going to arrest you, right? That's where I do not believe that people should have the right to fight back against them, whether the police are doing what's right or whether the police are doing what's wrong. And why? Because they're there doing their jobs. They're not perfect. They make mistakes, but getting beat up for your mistakes isn't a great way to have a work day, is it? You got to remember, these guys are at work just like you at work, sometimes a pretty crummy job that no one wants to do, right? Especially with a job like the police, where you get lots of benefits, but you also get lots of disbenefits. It can be a very unpopular job and unpopular profession, right? So should people be allowed to fight back? I mean, besides the, that immediate reaction of fight or flight, right? Where the person, and that is a different can of worms on itself. Should people be allowed to run away? That is something different, since it is natural human reaction. But what about the people whose natural reaction it is to fight, right? Because there is, and we've all heard of the fight-flight response, right? So what about the people whose natural instinct isn't to run away, but is to actually attack? We probably see many examples of people just having their natural interactions or natural, the natural way they are as people come out while they're in this situation with the police, and it gets them into trouble, right? There has to be a level of understanding on both sides where, people are obviously going to be upset you're arresting them, okay, but does that give you the right to hit the officer? It does not. Does it give you the right to fight back against the officer? Unfortunately, it does not. But at what point do we draw the line? What about an officer who's coming into our house, maybe in uniform, and trying to hurt us, trying to kill us? One of the greatest serial killers, it looks like, of the United States was actually a former police officer, and they knew how to work the police system, and that's probably why they were able to elude the police all those years, is because they knew how to act like the police. And who knows, maybe that's how they were getting into houses. People impersonate the police all the time. Should we be allowed to fight back against people who we believe are pretending to be the police? Now that's a different can of worms. Now that's where you're going down and you're analyzing the situation. You're like, is the officer in a uniform? Now we just seen that in the Nazir case. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, where a uniformed officer ununiformed officer, an undercover officer tried to stop a vehicle. You don't know who this is, even if they're saying police. Criminals say police. You know what I mean? As a citizen, I've seen that on the street. I've seen some a random criminal identify themselves as the police to try to mess with people. Totally. More in a fun way, but they totally can. So you don't know if the officer there isn't in uniform. Then I think there should be a reasonable level where, yes, you should be allowed to defend yourself, right? Because you don't know if these are police officers. How do you know that it's not a member of organized crime or some serial killer, right? How do you know? How do you know it's not someone who's actually trying to hurt you? How do you know this isn't a corrupt officer? Should you be allowed to fight back in that circumstance? Well, I think so, right? If the cop isn't in uniform, but even a fake cop can get uniform. So being allowed to defend yourself against the police, is it cut and clear? No, it's not. You're supposed to comply with them, but to what level, right? When you're taking a traffic stop, they're in the cars, it's hard for you to deny. But if they show up at your house in the middle of the night, ununiformed, just saying I'm a police officer and have a plastic badge, what are we supposed to do as citizens? Right? Should we be allowed to beat up this officer? Should we fight this officer? Is that unusual? Right? There's got to be an established protocol. I believe, and I've said this in other videos, between how the police and how the public interact that needs to be understood and trained on both sides. Why? Because situations like that can be avoided. People will know what to do when a non-uniformed officer comes up. Well, how is that officer going to identify themselves? And how can you check up on the officer? And you need to have the officer understand that someone may want to check up and make sure you're a police officer before letting them in your house, before letting them search, before answering your questions. There's got to be a reasonable expectation both ways. So do I think that you should blindly have the right to fight the police? No, but you should be able to stand up for yourself. You should be able to make sure and verify that this is a real police officer, right? You should be able to stop the police officer, and the officer should be understanding to this. And why? Because it's so easy for con artists to pretend to be police officers, whether it be fake cars. You just even own the right car and a couple lights, people believe you're a police officer and they'll do anything you want, right? So should we be allowed to fight the police? No, but yes, in the right circumstance or the right situation. What do you think? Do you think that we should be allowed to fight the police until we've seen a reasonable amount of evidence that they are in fact a police officer? Should we have the right to fight them when they're ununiformed and not have the right when they're uniformed, right? So there has to be a reasonable explanation, a reasonable, expectation set from both sides that we both need to follow so that we know we're both doing what we need to do as the police officer or as the citizen, right? Because these guys have a hard job to do, and they're there to enforce laws in our community. Whether that be good for us or bad for us, I think that's open to debate, right? So definitely what I believe is that you should contact your local politician about police accountability and tell them, hey, these cops, they need to be accountable for their actions, right? Tell me what you think in the comments. Should you be allowed to fight back? If the police officer shows up unexpectedly and you turn around and clock them, should you get charged for that? I don't think so. If you cannot see that it's an officer first, I don't think you should be charged. And I believe that you should be definitely allowed to fight back to a reasonable level to an officer who's in plain clothes. Meaning you can call the police station and verify that officer is supposed to be there standing in front of you. And a quick way to get through the police, because that's the other problem we have, is, okay, let's say you do have an officer show up on you in the middle of the night, plain clothes, saying, I'm an officer. How do we check? How do we know that that is a police officer? When we get five more officers jumping on top of us and beating the crap out of us? So really there needs to be a lot more protocol on both sides when it comes to that. Should you be allowed to blindly fight back against the police? No, tell me in the comments. Tell me what you think. Do you think we should be allowed to fight back? No? Yes? What do you think? Anyways, this has been another police accountability show. Don't work too hard.